guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Room. We're here once again in this wonderful ranty room for all things Formula 1. And what can be said? It was an okay race for Sochi, weren't it? Not a stunner, still a yawnathon. I had my dinner halfway through the race, that's how riveting it was. But for Sochi, it was okay. So I'll just leave it at that. Of course, we had a bit of drama prior to the race starting, of course, with Lewis Hamilton doing some silly, stupid pit lane procedures, deciding that he wasn't going to use the start place where you're meant to start, you know, do your practice starts. Decided he wasn't going to use that, he was going to use the end of the pit lane twice, like a knob. And unfortunately picked himself up 2 5-second time penalties served in his pit stop, so 10 seconds total. And yeah, everyone's always been saying Hamilton can be his own worst enemy, and Hamilton is the only person that can stop Hamilton from winning the championship. And it's a couple of mistakes now, isn't it? Of course, we saw the first race in Austria, we've seen Monza, and now we've seen here at Sochi, where it's just needless things. It's something he doesn't need to do or put himself in a position to do. But he does it anyway. And I think sometimes when you're in such a winning car and you're just so dominant and nothing ever goes wrong for you, maybe sometimes he thinks he's above the law. I don't know. But anyway, the team have said, oh yeah, we told him to do it and whatever. But at the end of the day, driver's responsibility, especially making practice starts. But of course, if you've never seen this series before, then I'm going to score the drivers out of a maximum of 10 points based on their race weekend performance, and as low as 0 if you do particularly badly. However, I can award bonus points for a special extra effort of a race, and I can award minus points if you do particularly badly. So of course we're going to kick things off with the race winner, Valtteri Bottas. And what can be said for him? I disqualified him, I undisqualified him, and I moaned about him quite a lot. But he won today. Would he have won had Hamilton not picked up the stupid penalties? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Qualifying was crap by his standards. I mean, 6/10 off your teammate, a Red Bull getting in between you. What's that all about? And then at the start of the race, you make a move round the outside, you think, brilliant, he's got it. And apparently a bee hit his helmet, which made him slightly outbrake himself, and that's why Hamilton stayed P1. And you're like, oh, Valtteri. Valtteri, we're blaming the insects of the Russian people now. God, what are we doing here, pal? What are we doing? And yeah, he ended up winning the race by over about 8 seconds, I think it was. It was around 10 all the time, but then a bit of traffic towards the end just reduced the gap to Verstappen. But ultimately, once Hamilton served his penalties, he was in control of the race, and that was it. But it's just Bottas, isn't it? And all this to whom it may concern, fuck you again. You weren't going to win. You just weren't. You weren't going to win, and you did because of Hamilton's penalties. Not your fault, I know, but that qualifying effort was so crap. It was so bad. So for that reason, I'm only awarding Bottas 5 points, and you can whinge all you want about it, but I'm bored of him. I really am. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm just fed up with Bottas now. He just wins this one race because of a bit of a fluke, and then he thinks, oh, I've got my mojo back, and it's Bottas 47.8 now, and I've shaved my beard off again, but it's alright because I've grown my hair and I've dyed it blonde, and that means I'm quicker. I was like, oh, I'm not arsed. I'm really not arsed, Valtteri. So yeah, just 5 points. I've got to commend him for winning, but that qualifying effort was that crap, and the start of the race was that crap, that it's 5 points. And then we come to Max Verstappen. Yeah, an okay race by him. P2 in qualifying, fantastic effort, and a P2 in the race, which let's realistically think he wasn't probably going to get again had it not been for Hamilton's penalty. But he benefited from it, and that's it. Split the Mercedes, job done. In qualifying and the race as well this weekend, so fair play to him. In the race, though, however, it looked like he had an initial good start and a good getaway, and it looked like he could be up to P2 perhaps. But then Ricciardo had a brilliant run, and as Verstappen lost traction around the outside, Ricciardo nipped through and temporarily was down to P4 was our Max, and Ricciardo was doing well. So, yeah, a bit unfortunate in that sense, but overall the race was fantastic. Pretty lonely for the top 3 once we got the penalty adjusted and everything with Hamilton. The drama pretty much died down there. It was an easy top 3, you knew where they were coming. But for Verstappen, short and sweet really. Solid drive, solid effort. That little mistake at the start, dock you a couple of points for that. But ultimately, fantastic qualifying effort and fantastic race. So it's going to be 8 points to Max Verstappen. Good effort. And now it's time for Lewis Hamilton, and like I said in the briefing there, it's just no need. It's just no need to do silly things like that. Just stick to what you do. If you do a practice start in the pit lane at the right-hand side of the fast lane, and you queue up, you do it there. You don't just suddenly decide that I'm going to do it at the end of the pit lane. I don't know what goes through his mindset when he thinks he can do things like this, and the team think they can do things like that as well. Like I said, sometimes it just makes you think that maybe he's so dominant and nothing ever stops him that he can do things like that. I don't know what gets in your mindset to even think of risking it. Just for the sake of a bloody practice start. It's something that you do it loads of times in practice, you do it loads of times prior to qualifying, just don't get it. I don't get the need. But anyway, there you go, that's my rant over with that. And then he ultimately just threw in the towel, didn't he, and took P3. He got within 10 seconds of Verstappen and then he stayed there. And you're thinking, you've just thrown in the towel, haven't you? He was like, oh, don't talk to me anymore, Bono, I'm not bothered. It's like, for fuck's sake, you're third. You've still got a 40-odd point lead in the championship anyway. You know, what other driver's going to get a 10-second time penalty and still get a podium? So stop whinging. This is what it's frustrating. Very frustrating, especially when the likes of Ricciardo that's fighting for points got a 5-second time penalty. Went, yep, sorry, that's my bad. I'll take that on the chin, guys. I'll just drive faster. And he did it. He did what he needed to do. Hamilton, 10-second time penalty. Wow. Throw in the towel. That's what? Annoys me. Anyway, I'm going to get hate for it because there's been quite a lot of hate in the last 2 episodes about me actively hating on Hamilton because of his mistakes. And yeah, you make a mistake, you fuck up, you're in the best car. I want to penalise you for it. It's the cruel room. So for that reason, it's going to be just 3 points to Lewis Hamilton. And that's only for the qualifying, really. I'm not marking the race at all. 3 points because I think, you know what, you'd had a good lap there. And to just scrape through into Q2 with a second left to get a lap time in and then to refocus your mindset and get pole by 6/10, fair play. So that's the only reason he's getting 3 points. The rest of it is just shit. So there you go, 3 points to Lewis. And then we come to Sergio Perez. Lonely, I'm Mr. Lonely. I have nobody to call my own. Oh, and love me. Certainly did need someone to love him in that pink Racing Point, didn't he? All alone in P4, but a solid drive. Great effort. P4 in qualifying, P4 in the race. Unbelievable stuff. Ricciardo initially had the measure of him at the start of the race, but then the pace of that Racing Point after that pit stop, fantastic. Went through the field, stayed fourth, brilliant effort. You can't doubt it that he had some pace today. Shame that we couldn't see where Lance Stroll was going to end up. He unfortunately was a victim in the first lap. We'll get to him obviously. But yeah, for Racing Point and for Perez, 12 points pick up is amazing, especially at a weekend where Ferrari hardly scored points again, so they gap them a bit more. And of course, McLaren not picking up any points, crucial for them, and that's really helped them out. So Sergio Perez, it's going to be a solid 9 points. 9 points to Sergio Perez there. Well worthy effort, fantastic. Can't really fault anything, to be honest, but yeah, 9 points. I think there was one driver out there today that did a slightly better job, which is why Perez doesn't get the full points, but 9 points, top job, Perez. And then we come to Daniel Ricciardo. As we mentioned, he picked up that 5-second time penalty and was just like, yeah, I'm going to drive faster. It was a really strange one, actually, because Ocon was told to shift out the way, which Ocon duly obliged, but I think Ocon left it a bit late into turn 2, where he just pulled out the way, and I think it surprised Ricciardo a bit, and he hopped over the curb and didn't take the escape route that he should have done. But it didn't cost him a position. He put his foot down, got that 5-second gap to Leclerc, and that's what he needed to do. At the start of the race, a really strong performance to get ahead of Verstappen, but then he's tumbled back, went a bit wide, and then Ocon got him. And then he thought, oh, Ocon's matching him here. And for the first part of the race, Ocon did. They were keeping together after the safety car period and did a top job. And you think, yeah, fair play Ocon, but then Ricciardo got let through, and then Ricciardo really released his full potential again and was on the march. But sadly, not enough to catch up to the Racing Point of Perez, but nonetheless, a solid drive. So for Daniel Ricciardo, I'm going to award him 8 points. I think that was a solid drive for Daniel Ricciardo. I'm docking him a couple of points, one because he had an initial good start, but then slipped back behind his teammate, and obviously one for the 5-second time penalty. Although it didn't cost him, it put a bit of unnecessary pressure and strain on the Renault team to push, and it also pushed that car a little bit more than it necessarily needed to do. But nonetheless, a fantastic drive. So 8 points to Daniel Ricciardo. Next up, it's time for Sha-La-La. That's right, it's Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. And overall, P6 for a Ferrari that's crap and was out in Q2, brilliant effort. Absolutely fantastic. I'm not taking anything away this weekend from Leclerc. We know the Ferrari's crap. He was the top Ferrari by a country mile, wasn't he? So yeah, a fair play to him for that. Qualifying was decent. I think he ended up P12, didn't he? Prior to the penalty for whoever was ahead. Was it Albon? Yeah, Albon got a penalty, didn't he, for gearbox? So yeah, Leclerc, a fair enough effort, a decent drive, but I am only going to score him 7 points this weekend because he took Stroll out, and I think it should have been a penalty. I think it should have been a penalty because they always say if there's not one driver solely to blame, then they don't issue a penalty. But Leclerc just punted him round, so I think that should have been some kind of a penalty there that he wasn't issued. So yeah, I'm a bit unfair. I'm a bit dubious with that one, to be honest, and that's why I'm only awarding him 7 points. I'm not marking his, his top drive, deserved P6 all day long, but taking Stroll out wasn't very nice. But as always, we have our resident. We haven't seen her in quite a while, in quite a number of races, but she is back. And we're going to ask Sandra for her Sandra Assisted Review, the SAR. We're going to ask our Sandra and see what she thinks now. Sandra, was that a penalty for Leclerc?
Yes.
Thanks, Sandra. Okay, thank you, Sandra. As you can see there, Sandra clearly thought it was a penalty, as did I. So there we go. But yes, as mentioned, it is just 7 points to Leclerc. Next up is Esteban Ocon, and what can be said about his race? It looked initially as though we mentioned he had the pace and measure of Ricciardo, nipping ahead cheekily after Ricciardo run slightly wide, after Verstappen mounted an attack back for P3. And in the end it looked good, and then he had to let Ricciardo through, and then Ricciardo showed his true pace, and then Ocon just slipped back sadly. And that's ultimately what caused the Ferrari car to get in the middle of those two. Ricciardo, then Leclerc, then, of course, Ocon. Had Ocon had a little bit more pace and matched Ricciardo more, then he wouldn't have had to get out of the way, and also Leclerc wouldn't have been between them. So, okay, a strongish race by Ocon this weekend, but not a fantastic one by any means. It looked good, and it just slipped away from him. So for that reason, it is only going to be 6 points to Esteban Ocon. I think it was an okay race, just slightly above average. Had he kept up with Ricciardo and maybe got ahead of Leclerc, I'd have give him some more points, but he just slipped away. So ultimately 6 points is all I can give him. And then we come to Dani Kvyat, one of the drivers that elected to start on the hard tyres after qualifying P11. And did a solid enough job on the hard tyres, was going long in the race, was up as high as second and third, and he was mixing it up there, and Hamilton was getting round him and all that sort of stuff after the penalties. You thought, good effort by Kvyat here to put on a show in front of his own fans. Then he pitted, put the mediums on, and away he went, and he showed some good pace. And he climbed his way up to P8, and then he thought, he's got to be getting Ocon. And unfortunately, he stayed behind Ocon for, it must have been at least 12 laps, maybe even more than 12 laps, where he was within a second, got the DRS in a couple of the zones, mounted an attack, but never overtook. And it was so surprising to see, considering Ocon was on like 20-lap old tyres and he was on fresh mediums and just couldn't make a way round. We know the Renault's strong in a straight line, of course, but I was just expecting that tyre difference for Kvyat to be able to nip ahead of Ocon, and sadly wasn't to be. But still a strong drive for Dani Kvyat and the AlphaTauri team. Good strategy overall to net P8 and 4 crucial points in the championship. And for that reason, I'm awarding Dani Kvyat 8 points. I think he's done a solid job these last couple of rounds, picking up decent points, and this round was no exception. So well done, Danny. 8 points to you. And then it is time for, of course, Dani Kvyat's stablemate in Pierre Gasly. A top drive again by him. They both mixed the strategies up. Gasly, of course, getting into Q3 once again. In the race, of course, he had to elect to start on the tyres he qualified on in Q2. And then they had an alternate strategy, elected to pit him for a second time. This was a crucial part of the race when the virtual safety car briefly came out after Romain Grosjean sent those boards skittling at turn 2, where you meant to go down the escape road. He sent those polystyrene boards skittling, and they had to replace those briefly. So I think AlphaTauri are expecting to get themselves a free pit stop during the VSC, or certainly losing a lot less time. But as Gasly came into the pits, the VSC ended, and they lost 2 positions and ended up falling down to P11. But a top drive to get ahead of Alex Albon and Lando Norris to get that P9. It was a brilliant effort, brilliant drive, and yeah, well deserved for P9 for Gasly. And as I keep mentioning in the Team Cruel walls, They need to pick up double points finishes now to make up for when Ferrari are outscoring or scoring less points than usual, and they've mitigated the damage once again this weekend. So well done to them for that. And it is also going to be 8 points for AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly, because I think they were both very equal today and this weekend. Throughout the sessions, they were both up there. So fair play to AlphaTauri, and 8 points to Pierre Gasly. And then it's time to come to the curious case of Alexander Albon, finishing P10 after qualifying P10 and taking a 5-place penalty for a gearbox. Only finishing P10 in a car that's finished up in second. We know the car's built around Verstappen, we get that, and we know that, and we understand that the second driver struggles, but I was really expecting a lot more from him this weekend. After such a strong performance at Mugello, finally getting a podium. We did see a couple of good overtakes around the outside by him on Norris and the likes, but overall it just wasn't to be, and only picking up 1 measly point again. Alex, Jesus sake, man. Yeah, I was expecting more. I think a lot of people expect more from him now, and it's just not coming, is it? I mean, he was a second off in qualifying to only qualify P10, so yeah, big shame for Alex, and that is why I'm scoring him 0. I've been generous to him a few times this weekend, this season so far. I've been generous to him, and now he's got to stop at some point. You know, I've been awarding him a couple of points when he's not done well. I'm like, oh, come on, Alex. But now I can't for that. A second off your teammate in qualifying, a crap race, really. Yes, you had 2 stops, I get that, but it just weren't good. Just weren't good. So yeah, 0 for Alex Albon. And then we come to Antonio Giovinazzi, the Italian stallion itself, finishing P11 just outside the points. It was the last of the cars to be lapped as well, actually, so the top 10 finished on the lead lap. Antonio sadly didn't, and a fantastic drive. And I said there was a driver that I felt did slightly better than Perez, and it's him. It's Antonio Giovinazzi. A lot of people are quick to put the back markers down and say, oh, he didn't have a fantastic drive. Oh, no, he only finished P11 because this and this. At the end of the day, Antonio Giovinazzi did a fantastic job. He did some cracking moves at turn 2 and turn 3 around the likes of the Hassers, Grosjean, Magnussen. He finished ahead of his teammate, Kimi Raikkonen, and was ahead of him for the majority of the race, apart from the pit stop areas. And he just drove fantastically well. He was ahead of Ferrari, of Vettel, all race. He drove a sensible race. He out-qualified his teammate as well. I'm thinking of more things that he did this weekend that really impressed me by him. And ultimately, I don't think he's going to be at Alfa next year. I think they're going to have potentially a fresh driver lineup, or maybe keep Raikkonen if they want experience and another youthful driver. And they might keep youth in the likes of Schwartzman or Mick Schumacher, etc. So I think his seat's under risk. Potentially he hasn't got a seat, but that was a credible drive there. That was a good drive. That was solid performance. And he ultimately didn't put a wheel wrong this weekend, so fair play to him for that. It was a strong drive. A lot of cars finished, only 2 retirements. He was P11. Fair play. Absolutely fair play, Antonio. So you're getting 10 points this weekend. That's the highest I've scored him this season. I think the best I've scored him is maybe a 6 or a 7. But he really punched above his weight this weekend, and a solid 10 points. So well done, Antonio. And then we come to Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, and what can be said for him, really? It was a poor qualifying in terms of his teammate beating him. Just missing out on Q2 was his teammate, actually. And yeah, after that, though, it just went from strength to strength. It was 18th, and then at the end of lap 1, it was 9th. It gained 9 places. Fantastic effort by K-Mag there. The same strategies on the Haas car, so they ended up back together again towards the latter half of the race. Grosjean's tyres dropped off. Magnussen started to drop off where Giovinazzi eventually got round him, but managed to maintain P12, finishing ahead of Vettel, and of course benefiting from Lando Norris's problems later on in the race. So did a solid drive. It was a good effort. Good effort by K-Mag, really was. The race delivered the best result it could with 12th effectively. So I was very pleased to see the Hassers up there, and yeah, didn't score points, but with, like I mentioned, a lot of cars left, they were above quite a lot of teams, so fair play for that. And it's going to be a solid 8 points for Kevin Magnussen. I think he did a solid job this weekend. Well done, Kevin. And then it's time for Sebastian Vettel, and after a spin and a shunt in qualifying, we just did nothing in the race, did we? Did we, Vettel? We didn't do anything at all. Nothing. Nil point. And that's what I'm awarding you. Nil point. That was pathetic again. I just don't know. I'm not even bothered anymore. just seeing him down there languishing and Raikkonen attacking him, and he can't get ahead of a Haas and he can't get ahead of another Alfa, and he's just, oh, forget it. 0 to Sebastian Vettel. And then we come to Kimi Raikkonen. After electing to go on the hard tyres and pit very late, he tumbled down the order in around where the Williams were, and eventually plucked his way back up and just couldn't get around Sebastian Vettel despite attacking for a few laps, and ended up finishing P14. So an okay race, a solid enough weekend by Raikkonen. Couldn't make the hard tyre strategy work like Kvyat did. Of course he's in the slower car, I get that, but Kvyat managed to finish ahead of his teammate, whereas Raikkonen ultimately couldn't. But nonetheless, an okay race, but outshone by your teammate this weekend. The spinning qualifying really didn't help him, and he lined up on the back row of the grid prior to the penalties, of course. And yeah, overall, just an okay race. So I'm going to award him 6 points. I think he did a solid enough job to catch up to Vettel. It'd been nice to see him attack him, and it'd been nice to see him being a bit closer to Giovinazzi at some points in the race. So yeah, 6 points to Kimi Raikkonen. An okay race. And now it's time for Lando Norris in the McLaren. And oh, it's such a frustrating one for him, isn't it? Unfortunately, I'm not sure what happened at turn 1. He got clipped. I know he got clipped. And then he slowed down, lost all his momentum after hitting the sausage curb. So maybe the car reset itself, or you know how cars can be. And then he had to slow down for Sainz, just spearing his way across the track again. Ran over a lot of debris. Came into the pits at the end of lap 1. Put the hard tyres on. And his race was effectively over there and then. He managed to recover and get as high as 9th, but then ultimately the hard tyres had cried enough, doing something like 44 laps, and they just dropped off the cliff towards the end there, and ultimately had to make a second pit stop with just 3 or 4 laps remaining, and tumbled out of the points. But a valiant effort by Lando, but his race was really hampered, whatever happened into that turn 1, turn 2 complex. It just all sort of kicked off around him, no big damage, but just enough to not make the car feel right. Behind the safety car, he was saying it was really heavy turning right, and then all of a sudden it would go light without any warning. So, you know, maybe something bent at the rear or potentially at the front of the steering or something. It was just an unfortunate race. So, for Lando Norris, it's a middle of the road, 5 points this weekend. Yeah, he may as well have retired from the race, to be honest. He did put a valiant effort and did do some cracking overtakes with Albon and, of course, Russell when they were all at the back of the grid after the respective problems. And yeah, it kept the show going, but unfortunately and ultimately the tyres were never going to hang on, and points were always going to be that bit of a stretch. But well done for trying. So 5 points to Lando Norris. And then it's time for Nicholas Latifi, and I can't exactly say it was a really good race by him. Not by any stretch of the imagination. It wasn't fantastic. But overall, it was a solid race, wasn't it? He had that crash in FP1, which was a bit of a shame. Big damage there, of course. Then in qualifying, out-qualified by his teammate once again, who snuck into Q2 for like pretty much every time this season, isn't it? I think he's only missed 2 sessions. And then he was ultimately down in 19th and then took a gearbox penalty, dropping in 1 place. And then in the race, after Russell buggered his race up all by himself, Latifi stayed ahead, so fair play for that. So because of the shunting practice and, of course, the lack of pace, really, he needed George to screw up for him to finish ahead, but he did. That's how it happens, that's racing. I'm awarding Latifi 7 points. A solid-ish drive. I think it deserves credit and note for what he did, but ultimately wasn't a fantastic race by him. So 7 points to Latifi. And then we come to Romain Grosjean, and after what can be described as a strong qualifying for him after terrible free practice sessions, he was on the radio. The car wasn't doing what it wanted at all, was it? He was just saying, guys, I can't drive this car. I feel like I'm going to crash at every corner. And you could see it, couldn't you? If the wind slightly changed direction or was pointing in a way the car really didn't like, it was squirreling in. Honest to God, it was like wrangling a bull. That car, and it was crazy. So, you know, fair play for him for ended up starting and qualified 16th. He pushed the car to its limits there, almost going to Q2, so that was a worthy note there. And then in the race, climbed up to P10, so not quite as dramatic as K-Mag getting from 18th to 9th, but still a fair effort. And then in the race, he was running around with K-Mag. They were running around 11th and 12th for quite a while. But Grosjean's tyres just went off, sadly, and he just kept going wide at turn 2 and going through the marker boards, around the marker boards, and doing whatever he wanted to the marker boards. I'm sure they're putting a sexual harassment claim in because they were penetrated quite a lot by Grosjean. So for that reason, Romain Grosjean is going to be in middle of the road, 5 points. I'm not going to slag him off for that. I think it was a good effort, solid enough drive, but he didn't make the tyres last like K-Mag did. ultimately had to make a second stop, and that's what really cost him. So yeah, 5 points to Kevin Magnussen. He showed some potential there. He had a great qualifying, but overall in the race just wasn't there, was it, for him? He nearly put it all together, but not quite. So 5 points to Grosjean. And then we come to the last of the finishers, George Russell. We're here again, aren't we, George? Once again, we do a mighty effort in qualifying, get into Q2, and then in the race, nothing happens other than we screw it up, don't we? We screw it up. So he elected to pit at the start after the safety car came out. Not sure if he got caught up in any shenanigans or whether it was just a strategic thing, but he put the hard tyres on, hoping to get to the end of the race on those, and then he locked up after about 6 or 7 laps on them. So locked up, flat spotted the tyre while he was battling around with Norris and Albon, and then put the mediums on. They didn't last till the end, and then put the soft tyres on right at the very end just to give him something to finish with. And unfortunately, overall, a poor performance. So yeah, George Russell, once again, fantastic on a Saturday, but Sundays just don't come your way, do they? And you tend to screw it up yourself most of the time now. So for that reason, it's just going to be 3 points to George Russell. It was okay, and I'm only awarding him those 3 points for the Saturday. Pretty much like Hamilton. The Saturday, well done. The Sunday, no go, I'm afraid. So just 3 points. And then we come to Carlos Sainz. And yeah, very much taking himself out of the race there. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. An okay qualifying, P6. You know, the team said, oh, I'm not upset. The team radio, if you've heard that on YouTube, get it watched. He went, oh, I know you guys are upset. No, Carlos, we're not upset. Like, P6 is okay. Could have done a really good race from there. It didn't look to have the measure of the Renaults, potentially. The McLaren was looking a bit struggling. Of course, Stroll being out of the race as well could have meant that they were picking up a couple of points each. You know, being around the 8th, 9th area, a bit like AlphaTauri. But sadly, he went charging into turn 2. He got it all wrong and tried to cut through the little escape route bit that you meant to take to avoid a penalty, and ploughed it straight into the wall, across the track. It cost his teammate time as well, and big damage to the McLaren. So, thankfully he's okay, but it's a 0 for Carlos Sainz. How can you score that point? That was just a bit silly, wasn't it? Understeering into a wall, taking an escape road that's meant to slow you down. Yeah, I can't award points for that. That's just, it's the cruel room. God, big fat 0. Jolyon would be pleased with that, though. And then last but no means least, it's Lance Stroll. As I mentioned previously, mentioning Charles Leclerc, he got took out by Charles Leclerc at turn 4. Got clipped, he went wide, and Leclerc just went, doink, get round, popped him into the wall, and that was the end of Lance Stroll's race. So we couldn't see what he was capable of, and for that reason, it's a middle of the road, 5 points. Stroll deserves points. I think he had a good qualifying effort, and in the race, of course, he had potential to be the top 5 this weekend based on Perez's pace. Certainly find it round with the Renaults at the very least if he wasn't at Sergio Perez's pace. So, what can you do? What can you do? You know, he had a good start to get up there anyway. So yeah, I'm afraid just a simple middle of the road 5 points to Lance Stroll. I can't score him any more, any less. I couldn't see what he was capable of doing in the race. But obviously, had he had the pace of Perez or similar, we could have been looking at a top 5 finish, a double top 5 finish for the Racing Point team. If not, maybe just behind Ricciardo. But certainly ahead of the likes of Leclerc and Ocon. So there we go. Just 5 points to Lance Stroll. So there you go, guys. That was the runners and riders of the Russian Grand Prix at Sochi. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down below as always. The results are on the screen now of how that plays out for the Crawl Room Championship. And yeah, any surprises there? Or well, let me know where your favourites are actually, and think. Do you think they're in with a shout? Because it's very close. I know it's very close up there. And yeah, thanks a lot to Matthew for doing this table for me. Without him, we wouldn't have a points system at all because I can't keep up with points. I'm crap at maths. And so yeah, a massive thank you to Matthew D'Souza. His channel is in the description below. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Look forward to replying to you in the comments, and I'll see you all next week. Much love.